Whoever you are, however you doing, whatever you done, hello. Once upon a time, I conducted an experiment on maggots. I selected 10 of them from the talent pool, careful to shortlist the healthiest, most athletic, least dead ones, and then put these in a steep-sided tray. Then I timed them. I'm not sure what you would call a collection of maggots. A chew? A wiggle? Whatever the proper collective noun, to watch a soup of maggots, you wouldn't think that they had nailed decision-making. Each one of them moves like someone trying to get dressed in a sleeping bag. Having observed them for 3 minutes, I could safely say that they had shuffled around without any clear direction or ambition. So next, I put different coloured plastic sheets over each half of the tray. The colours were random: red versus blue, yellow versus green, orange versus purple, use your imagination. In each case, all 10 maggots had unanimously selected a favourite side of the tray and manoeuvred into it within 3 minutes. The colours, as it turned out, were not important. The maggots would always choose whichever side was darker. Light intensity, so it seemed, was stressing them out. Was this because they felt darkness was safer, cleaner, holier? Did the shade unclog their little maggoty chakras? The truth could be any or none of these, depending on which maggot you asked. Like their human observers, my insect athletes spared very little time unpacking motivations for their own behaviours. They just committed, acted, and away they went, with a spring in their squirm. Complications arise, to put it mildly, when we assume that our human cognitive capacities must be in tune with the truth. This is to say that our brains have a firm grip on reality. It's more likely that things in fact work the other way around. You see, after the world has seeped in through our various senses and been processed by the brain, what emerges need not comport with reality in every detail. The bit we become aware of, our conscious ideas and impressions, don't have to be objectively true to be useful. They only need to solve more problems than they create, on average. Maggots seek out dark places because that's what's helped their ancestors to survive. What personally motivates them to do this hardly matters, as long as they do it. Insects need to find food without getting spotted by birds. Birds need to collect insects without leaving their eggs unguarded. All of these creatures see the world differently, looking for patterns that mean something important to them. So darkness or height might feel inviting or scary to different organisms. Once we give the world a human-specific dimension of practicality, the most useful interpretations are what we call true. Just like maggots, stress in humans is caused by external conditions. These get a bit more nuanced for us than changing light levels. Approaching exams, recent bereavements, pay cuts, and moving house all count as stressful events in the modern world. They each trigger a fight or flight response, the same as you would see in any other animal. One thing we don't need while fighting or flighting is an immune system. So that's often one of the first things to go. It's well known that people and animals are more likely to catch colds and contract infections while under long-term stress. This is because stress hormones reduce the activity, number, and lifespan of white blood cells, so the energy can be invested elsewhere. Hormones do this by activating genes, which were made available by the presence or absence of other hormones. It all gets a bit complicated, but in a highly convoluted and roundabout way, stress leaves us vulnerable to disease. It'll come as no surprise that you have no conscious control over this. Nobody can choose which genetic switches get turned on or off in their bodies. We can't decide how much stress we feel in a given situation. Which chemicals get released, and in what quantities, is automatic. Because of this, some people will insist that our genes are ultimately in charge. The entire construction and maintenance of every organism's body is rooted in a genetic process. But genes don't cause stress, or happiness, or other feelings like guilt, love, dread, gratitude, pride, relief, or anything else. Events in our lives don't meddle with genes directly. They have to go through the middleman we call our brains. Before we can act on all that messy external information, it all has to be interpreted first. So, as you might expect, the resulting spectrum of emotional and behavioral responses are as unique as the brains that unconsciously mediate them. But, like it or not, the brain is part of the body, which means it was built by genes. Imagine walking home to discover a fire truck parked outside your house, blocking the road with lights flashing. In this situation, you don't choose whether to release hormones like adrenaline or cortisol. Your brain just does. And there's no top-down control of any physiological process. How could there be? A brain can't decide which neural systems to install in itself in advance of its construction. If so, we'd probably pass on all of the systems that weaken us whenever we think about our house burning down. Natural selection is what designs, builds, and calibrates these systems. It holds on to what's adaptive, not what's truthful. Spiders bolt from beneath upturned rocks. Deer flee from crunching sticks. And making an insurance claim fills people with dread. Each of these reactions is involuntary and unconscious. They are reflexes. Does this mean that legal processes, sudden noises, and direct sunlight are actually in charge of the body and the brain? In his spectacular book, The Blank Slate, cognitive psychologist Steven Pinker remarks, quote, "Human nature differs only in degrees of complexity from clockwork." End quote. If this is true, would that mean that the world owns a larger slice of who you are than you do? Before you answer, I would wag a modest finger at past Wiggle Soup episodes, like the one on ghosts, because what we mean by ourselves is far from obvious. In any case, wouldn't belonging to a culture of individuals, each of whom was built by genes, each of whom interacts in complex ways made possible by their genetics, sit DNA on the throne, squarely and comfortably, with seatbelt fastened? I, for one, find social gatherings exhausting, and performing on stage exhilarating. Someone else might find these same environments respectively energizing and terrifying. Something in our genome, surely, must distinguish the extroverts from the shy, the risk-taking from the cautious, the generous from the selfish. And if not DNA, what coordinates these differences? The answer, as I've come to understand it, is nothing. Or at least, nothing in particular. It's all chaos. This is a difficult fact of life to fully grasp. Nobody is in charge. The world is a cascade of ingenious, intricate, meticulously interconnected networks of cause and effect that have no centralized control or agency. There's no agenda, no goal, no grand design. Whatever you are not a brain controlling a body by adding and subtracting hormones. Nor are you a body reading instructions off a genetic code in response to changing conditions. Nor are you a gene soup unconsciously managing a brain by commissioning chemical receptors. You are no more and no less than all of these things simultaneously. Where, then, I hear you demur, does free will reside in all of this? Good question. If you're personally invested in the idea of free will, or find it depressing that free will might be a deeply entrenched illusion, the prognosis doesn't look good. To me, the suggestion that human actions are somehow immune to all external influences, independent of brain chemistry, remaining stubbornly under our conscious control, seems absurd. The firing of neurons generates our thoughts. By what mechanism could the reverse possibly be true? Coercion, persuasion, suggestion, and manipulation are so universally human they remove all hope of so-called libertarian free will. If you're still unconvinced, consider: we don't choose our parents. We don't choose our genes. We didn't pick the culture we were born into or the time and circumstances of our birth. We don't decide where on the sliding scale of chill versus anxious, trusting versus suspicious, yada yada yada, our personalities sit. And all these factors determine what we think and what we do throughout our lives. Even things we feel justified in taking credit for, like how hard we work, are products of our genes, upbringing, the people we work with, conversations we've had, and a tapestry of other chaotic life events that we did not choose. There's really nothing we can claim total responsibility for, despite the praise or condemnation that typically come our way. Stressful as it can be, everything in the universe cruises along, moment to moment, riding entropy dispassionately into the future. There's nowhere in our 4 dimensions, or possibly 11, where you, the subjective experiencing conscious you, get to be lord and master of every causally connected process. You are just a part of it, that singular, continually unfolding, law-abiding event that we call a universe. Nothing about your suite of abilities, appearance, health, IQ, or life choices could ever be reasonably deserving of credit or scorn. Neither could your motivations, intuitions, beliefs, fitness, or family history. Pride is not a sensible reaction to the circumstances that are you. Something approaching gratitude might be better, though not gratitude towards anything, merely the relief that things haven't turned out worse. Once we've filed free will where it belongs, between Frankenstein and Friday the 13th, in an archive of implausible myths, the world becomes a turbulent landscape of luck. You don't have to look hard to find someone at the bottom of a deep valley, having suffered spectacularly bad fortune. You'd be perfectly justified in feeling thankful or consoled that you are not down there with them. Others stand on the peaks of mountains, having been strikingly fortuitous in life. Not that they chose to be there. The landscape shifts and sways irresistibly. Steps an individual might take to improve their position appear indistinguishable from the surging terrain beneath their feet. Every conscious decision we make is just another manifestation of the universe doing its thing, unfolding in exclusive accordance with the laws of physics. Gratitude, love, awe, and curiosity are all perfectly appropriate ways of dealing with this reality, none of which depend on free will. If we're being really honest, nobody actually wants to be in total control of everything they do. We're very quick to deny our autonomy whenever we mess up. We see murderers clamour for the insanity plea. Unhappy partners claim they were driven to infidelity, and millions read their horoscopes. Teachers blame the parents, parents blame the government, while delinquents swear their friends made them do it. People seem more than willing to embrace environmental determinism when it suits them. Truth bows to utility again. But notice, if usefulness makes things true, can't it be just as useful to assign people full responsibility for their actions as it is to point the finger at others? We should recognize that both of these ideas are conveniently oversimplistic. Arthur C. Clarke said in Profiles of the Future, quote, "Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic." End quote. If our actions are determined, we are not responsible for them. If they are random, then we are not responsible for them. There is no third way. Everything in the universe must either be determined or random. It can't be a little bit determined or a smidgen random. Being part of the universe, brain matter too is no grey area. Yet we feel free. How come? Genes affect behaviour, which affects the environment, which affects our genes. This circular feedback loop, Pinker's clockwork, gives highly unpredictable results, but it is still a deterministic process. The sensation of freedom that we get from this complexity, Clarke's magic, comes from our inability to examine all of the interacting genetic and environmental components. I think there's something uplifting and magnificent in the idea that a slice of the cosmos itself plays out inside each one of us, and that it's that grants our unique nature, personality, perspective, and self. If I'm right about this, then it would make the actions of others a lot easier to forgive, and our own personal misfortunes far easier to make peace with. Just like anything else I've discussed in the last dozen Wiggle Soups, what I'm saying here may or may not, to a greater or lesser extent, be true. Not in every detail. But ideas don't need to be true to serve as useful ways of thinking. Not even that last sentence. Next episode, I'd like to field test some of these human intuitions, which ones we can trust and which ones we should run a mile from. To do this, I'd like to invite back two of my favourite maggots of intrigue, Molly and Mike. We're going to chat it out, work it through, make some improvements, get a real handle on things, decide